what's up everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today is time for me to give my final verdict for this little thing here. The ASUS TUF Gaming A15 laptop. This exact model here is the 506iV, which houses the brand new AMD Ryzen 7 CPU in it with a proper RTX2060. And I'm gonna leave my Amazon affiliate link down below in the description so you can check it out through Amazon. So if you're interested in this laptop, if you're interested in how it performed in benchmarking, what's my final verdict, then stick around and yeah, check out some close-up shots that I did from this laptop, and then I'm gonna talk a lot more about it.
Resurrected from the dead, hungry for revenge.
Right, so hope you enjoyed all these little clips here, and I mean, after playing around with it for quite some time, I mean, and comparing it to the G14, which I've done a review as well on my YouTube channel, you can check that out as well. Yeah, there are definitely differences here. This one here is of course a little bit bigger laptop as well, because it has a bigger screen, so it might be a little bit better fit for pure gamers out there, right? But yeah, first of all, I mean, depending on how much memory you exactly want in this 506iV, expect to pay around $1,200 for it. Spec-wise though, this thing here indeed comes with the brand new AMD Ryzen 7 4800H that runs at 2.9 GHz and boosts up to 4.2 GHz while gaming. And of course it's also worth to mention that this here is a proper 8-core 16-thread monster. For the video card on this exact model we find the NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 2060 with 6 gigs of GDDR6 VRAM that of course supports ray tracing as well, right? Now for the display, ASUS is using a 15.6-inch 1920x1080 resolution IPS panel that runs at 144 Hz. And yeah, quick look at it. I mean, the colors do not pop out as much as I would love to see here, but it's still definitely a better choice than a like a grayscale TN panel, right? But moving on, it also does come with 1TB of M.2 SSD and of course has 16 gigs of DDR4 memory. And while opening up the laptop, I was pretty pleased to see a lot of upgradability options here. So as we can see, it does have 2 memory slots and 2 NVMe M.2 slots, and the most interesting thing here was, I guess, the extra 2.5-inch SSD drive bay here that we can find. Also the cooling solution looks pretty decent as well for the GPU and the CPU. All in all, spec-wise it's a pretty decent machine, right, that can run pretty much every task that you throw at it, right? But how has my time been with it, right? What have I really liked and what I've disliked about this laptop here? So as it is a TUF lineup laptop and not the ROG lineup, it is a lot bulkier than the ROG G14 that has very similar specs to the TUF 506iV. Though by being bulkier it can house a bit better cooling solution in it, although it didn't really impress me that much versus the G14. I did some benchmarking and did check out the temperatures, but I'm gonna cover them in the benchmarking section. Now what it did have more and better placed were the ports. So on the TUF 506iV we find just one USB port on the right side of the laptop, which is pretty odd. But thankfully there are a total of 2 more USBs on the left side, as well as a USB Type-C, a HDMI port, a LAN port, and a 3.5mm audio jack. Also, thankfully here the power plug is built at the very end of the left side, so when charging the laptop the power cable is not going to be in our way. I do really like the addition of a proper LAN port here, but it does look like a strange big hole on the side. I guess it would make a little bit sense to make a collapsible port in the future here. The overall design is pretty decent, but personally I don't like it that much here. It just looks a little bit dated. Decent, but dated for 2020. Then again, it is one of the cheaper RTX 2060 models out there, and it has the Ryzen 7 CPU as well here. But still, I feel they can do a lot better design job for the TUF series. But maybe it would take a little bit too big of a chunk away from their ROG lineup then. The bezels are pretty thin though, and it even has a webcam built into it. I did a quick little test for it, and yeah, just check it out here. Right, so this is the quality of the built-in web camera on the FA506 IV. And it's pretty decent actually, nothing really bad to say here. The picture quality, image quality is pretty decent, and the audio is totally fine as well, considering it's just a tiny, small little web camera on the top bezel of the laptop edge there. And yeah, totally perfect for some conference calls that you need to do wherever, right? So as you can see, the webcam is pretty decent for this laptop, right? And something else that is pretty decent is the power. This thing is a proper powerhouse with its 8 cores, 16 threads with an RTX 2060, right? And I did do some proper benchmarking as well, you know, testing out the most popular games, right? Which makes sense, right? So yeah, check out my benchmarking section, which is coming up right now. Right, so welcome to the benchmarking section, and before we begin with our tests here, let's take a quick little peek at CPUs and GPUs, right, and check out what the idle temperatures are doing here. And yeah, as we can see, we are running the AMD Ryzen 7 Mobile 4800H, right, base clock at around 2.9 GHz, which boosts to around 4.2. I even see almost 4.3 here. But anyway, yeah, a pretty decent 8-core 16-thread CPU, right? And I'm using core temp at the moment. If you know something better to check the temperature, please let me know, because core temp is mainly for Intel CPUs, but it does show us around 50 degrees Celsius as our idle temperature. Now we can check also GPUs, and GPUs we can see the integrated AMD Radeon GPU, which is, you know, integrated in the CPU, so it should be pretty much the same temperature, and it is. It's around 48 to 50 degrees Celsius here, which is really, it's pretty decent because my room is around 23 degrees Celsius at the moment here. And yeah, RTX 2060, right? And for that we do have 45 degrees, so it's a little bit cooler than the CPU. Anyway, these are the temperatures here, and yeah, first of all, let's kick things off with a proper Cinebench and see how it does there. So Cinebench just finished here, and as we can see, the multi-threaded CPU score is 3928 Cinebench points, with the single core performance coming in at 465 Cinebench points, which is a totally fine score for an 8-core 16-thread AMD Ryzen 7 4800H here, right? So 8-core 16 threads, and as we can compare it here straight to something like the desktop i7 7700K, which is an amazing CPU actually, and it received 476 points, right? So around 10 points better performance on single core. That's absolutely amazing performance in my opinion from this AMD Ryzen CPU, right? And if we look at the multi-threaded performance here, so 3900 points, it's better than the desktop Ryzen 7 1700X, which is also a pretty amazing you know, multi-threaded CPU, right? And when comparing to something like my 7900X, which is my desktop PC CPU with 10 cores, 20 threads, it receives around 5400 points. So not quite there yet, right? But it's missing 2 cores and missing 4 threads, right? So taking these into consideration, absolutely phenomenal performance from this AMD CPU here, built into this small little 15-inch TUF lineup ASUS laptop, right? But anyway, let's move on to our first gaming benchmark, and let's run Assassin's Creed Odyssey's benchmark mode. Alright, so Assassin's Creed Odyssey finally running here, and yeah, we can see our information right, Ryzen 7 4800H with NVIDIA's RTX2060 running the 445.87 drivers. And we're gonna be running at our native resolution, which is the 1080p screen that we have here, and we do have 144 Hz here as well, which is really amazing, right? Of course, it doesn't affect the benchmarking results, right? But it's still a proper display for gaming, right? And we're gonna be using pretty much all the detail settings on the most maximum settings beside anti-aliasing. So everything is going to be as maximum as possible. Feel free to fiddle around with it when you actually get the laptop, right? Because I'm not so sure it's gonna get 60 frames per second here, but it might, because it's 1080p. Anyway, let's run the benchmark and see how it fares. Alright, so let's check the frame rate here, and we can also see some frame rate over here. And it's 50 frames per second here. 55, almost 60 frames per second at the very maximum detail, and dropping to 40, 30, 40. Doesn't really want to go below 40, but it dips here and there to 35 or something like that, but still stays above 40 here. And yeah, the graphical detail looks absolutely phenomenal still to this day. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, one of the better looking games out there, right? And maybe it gives us a small little glimpse how Assassin's Creed Valhalla is going to run on this little puppy here, right? And yeah, the benchmark should finish any minute now. And let's see what the exact average frame rate is going to be. But yeah, 45, 40 frames per second when looking at the village here, or the town, right? Totally fine frame rate considering it is on the most maximum detail possible, right? At 1080p. Right, so 45 frames per second, yeah, that's something that I'd expect from a proper AAA game, right? Running on PC. But yeah, we definitely can't use our 144 Hz screen here to the full advantage. We are missing one. We are missing number one here. But of course, maybe we get around 100 frames per second when we turn all the graphical settings to the lowest settings, right? But that's not how I play the, the AAA games, right? Anyway, totally fine to play here, even on 45 frames per second, right? It's a lot better than 30, right? But still a little bit lower than 60. Anyway, let's move on to our next game, and let's check out how it fares in Call of Duty Warzone. Alright, so welcome to Call of Duty Warzone, right? And first things first, right? Let's head into the options menu, and yeah, we have full screen mode enabled, and we are using 144 Hz because we can, right? And we are using 1080p as our resolution here. And we're going to be using all the graphical settings on the most maximum detail as possible. And we are going to be using ray tracing as well here. So should give us a pretty nice idea how it will perform, how this laptop will perform with ray tracing on, fully using the RTX 2060's potential, right? So this should be a pretty decent test here, and yeah, let's just take a quick little, I think let's just take a Warzone Rumble here, because it's a brand new game mode, and we can, do some quick battles and see how the frame rate fares up in the right corner here, right? So yeah, let's head into Warzone Rumble. Alright, so 80 frames per second, 80! Of course it is 1080p, right? And I did test out a G14, ASUS's ROG G14 a little bit earlier, which had pretty much the same specifications, a little bit different CPU, but also RTX 2060, but it had a 2560x1440p resolution screen that was locked at 60 Hz, right? But it also received similar frame rate, but a little bit lower, right? It received like 60 or something like that. This here receives 80, but this is a 1080p screen, right? So it's 1080p resolution. And it doesn't look as sharp as the 1440p did on 14 inches. but it's still pretty darn sharp. It's still pretty darn sharp, and 80 frames per second, no issues at all. Totally fine to play, and of course, you know, play around with the settings, right, and try to get the frame rate up to 144 or something like that, right, constantly, so you can fully utilize your 144 Hz monitor. But totally perfect to play some Warzone on this laptop. Jesus, on most maximum detail possible at the moment. So even though I'm not hitting that 144 frames per second to utilize 144 Hz, it's still really good at 80 Hz, right? So the more frame rate we get, the better the experience will get. Oh god, I don't believe I can actually kill anybody here, but I'm gonna try. And we did do one headshot. It's kind of difficult to see from this small screen because I'm used to like 65 inches. But yeah, still pretty good to play, right? Another assist here. And yeah, totally fine for some Warzone. I guess I'm not really gonna play any further because this should give you a pretty decent idea already, right? So 80 frames per second, something around there is the average frame rate I would put this thing on, right? Of course we can disable ray tracing and maybe get a lot more frame rate boost, but anyway, this is how it performs in Warzone, right? Totally fine for some endless nights of Warzone. Alright, so welcome to Fortnite, and before we begin our match, right, heading into the options menu, into the settings, 1080p, right, and all the graphical settings are going to be most maximum as possible without the anti-aliasing. And yeah, should give us a pretty good idea how this game will perform, right? So let's do a solo run here and check out how the frame rate fares. Alright, so 90, 80, 90 frames per second, 91, 95, 100 already. Alright, I guess it's totally fine. What a shocker, right? It's totally fine to play some Fortnite, right? And it should run around 80 to 90 frames per second when you're running on 1080p, all the graphical settings on most maximum detail possible. It is not as sharp, of course, as 1440p, but it's still really hard to make out any zigzags, right? It's pretty sharp overall. 90, 98 frames per second in the party bus here, and yeah, hitting almost 100, over 100 frames per second. And let's just jump out here and let's select a small little quiet place where we're not gonna be bothered too much, where we can check out how the frame rate fares. But yeah, I'd say 90 to 100 frames per second even. But mostly I guess 80 to 100 frames per second is what you're going to be getting out of this laptop in Fortnite, right? But let's mess around with the settings a little bit, right? And let's see if we can actually, you know, fully utilize 144 Hz here, because it is a proper competitive game, right? And the better hertz we have and the better frame rate we have, the better we're going to be playing, right? And yeah, let's check out. So we have 87 frames per second. Yep, 87, 86 frames per second here. And let's head into the settings and let's turn all the graphical detail to the lowest possible and leave the resolution alone, so 1080p resolution, right? And see what the frame rate does. And we get 165 frames per second here. Really super smooth, so we can actually fully utilize 144 Hz here. Absolutely incredible. And still looks pretty nice as well, right? 155 frames per second, so no issues at all, right? And of course we could, you know, play around with resolution as well a little bit, right? But yeah, I wouldn't recommend anyone going below 1080p nowadays, right? This is the pure minimum, right? So 200 frames per second at some points, but yeah, mostly we're interested if it could, you know, stay above 144 all the time, right? And by the looks of it, it can. So yeah, this is how it performs in Fortnite, right? I'm gonna go back. Let's see what we have. We have 190, is it 190, 180 frames per second, right? Yep. Let's put everything back to the most epic, and let's even, I think anti-aliasing, let's leave it off. I don't think actually anti-aliasing will matter that much. So 90 frames per second. Ooh, it looks so good like this. Oh my god. Let's put the anti-aliasing on as well. Let's see how it affects display quality and stuff like that, right? I don't know. Frame rate stayed pretty much the same, 90 frames per second. And it does look a little bit blurrier, but it's really hard to tell at the moment. But still, I play without anti-aliasing. Anyway, yeah, totally fine laptop to play all sorts of competitive games, all sorts of AAA games, and just a really good laptop overall for the price that it is. Yeah, and let's quickly check out the temperatures as well. So what the full low temperatures were, right, when we were doing all these tests, how far did the temperatures creep up to, right? So let's check that out as well. Alright, so all my benchmarking has finished now, and here are the temperatures, right? So as we can see in core temp, the maximum temperature for the CPU supposedly was 107 degrees, which is absolutely insane. But I'm going to more trust the temperatures that the GPU is actually showing me, and the AMD GPU to be precise, right? Because this is integrated in the CPU, and we can see it did 93 degrees Celsius, which is, you know, considering my room temperature, which is 22 to 23 degrees Celsius, it's pretty fine, I guess. It is on the hot side, but most gaming laptops nowadays go around here, right? And if we check out the RTX2060 maximum temperature, it went to 87 degrees Celsius. So a little bit cooler, right? Almost like 7 degrees cooler, 6 degrees, right? But anyway, yeah, this is how hot the TUF 506 IV actually went, right? And yeah, considering it's 8 core, 16 threads, RTX 2060, right? And it's a medium-sized laptop. I mean, it's fine, but of course I do want to see temperature to be a little bit lower. Maybe if we, you know, fiddle around with the, you know, change out the thermal paste to something better, like liquid metal or something like that, we could get into the mid 80s maybe. But yeah, I mean, it's fine, I guess, right? Anyway, this has been the benchmarking section here. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and yeah, that's how this laptop performs. Alright, so I hope you understand now how powerful this laptop really is. It can pretty much run any AAA game that you throw at it, right, without any issues. And I do feel that the 1080p screen here is totally fine for the 15.6-inch screen. Also, the very nice addition of 144Hz panel here means 1080p makes even more sense, right? A lot easier to hit that 144 frames per second cap than it would have been, you know, on a 1440p screen or even a 4K one. And 1080p still looks pretty crisp and clean. Now, testing the battery at 100% screen brightness, I was able to get around 3 hours of usage with light tasks like, you know, browsing the web. And while gaming though, only about an hour, and that is pretty horrible experience in most games, as the laptop caps the frame rate out at around 20 to 30 FPS mark when on battery power. And oh yeah, worth mentioning here is of course the keyboard, right? It's pretty good, nice big buttons, and we even have the full numpad here. All of this in beautiful ASUS Aura Sync RGB, which was missing on the G14. Although a real bummer here is that there are only like 4 different RGB layouts for the keyboard here, which is really odd for a laptop like this, right? So hopefully they'll add different RGB lighting effects in the near future via a firmware update, right? And that's about it for this laptop. I mean, I hope I covered everything that I possibly could. If I left something out, you know, leave them down in the comment section so I can reply to you. But yeah, my overall verdict, what's my score gonna be? It's going to be a decent 7.5 out of 10. And yeah, I guess the biggest downside for me is that the design job on the TUF series it's just not my taste. And for $200 or $300 extra, we could get the ASUS G14, which of course is a smaller laptop, right? But it's just so much better as a laptop, right? It's a small little laptop that also has, you know, proper Ryzen CPU in it with a RTX2060. It's just absolutely incredible. So if you're looking into something cheaper, then of course, why not, right? But for me personally, I'm gonna save a couple of bucks to get the ROG G14. Anyway, that's going to be it for my review here, and yeah, I mean, oh god, I hope they, you know, improve the design of the TUF lineups a little bit more in the upcoming years. I'm just not on board at the moment with it. Overall though, power-wise and you know, price range is pretty perfect, so I can't really complain about there. Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching my video here, hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, leave a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, maybe subscribe as well, right? And of course, as I mentioned, if you have any questions, leave them down below in the comment section. Anyway, yeah, stay safe there, and I'll be seeing you soon. Ciao for now.